Wow, that's a tough one. I think one of the really most important things that he stressed all the way through his life, and it started with his defense of the British in the Boston Massacre, is he had this unswerving commitment to the rule of law. That was something that just went all the way through. Now that may seem like an obvious thing, but there are a lot of times when the rule of law is actually trampled. And he was adamant about that, and that's why he took the risk of defending the British in the Boston Massacre. It was, they deserve a proper trial. And I think the other thing that was very important about John Adams, and extremely important, was that he was one of the very few and one of the very first people to be such an abolitionist and so staunchly opposed to slavery. Well, you know, I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind all the time is that we're filtering all of this through 200 years of lenses. And so some people would say, oh, well, Adams is obviously conservative. Well, he was not a conservative. He got rid of the British government. So he wasn't a Tory. He wasn't a conservative. On the other hand, he had a more steady, more cautious approach to the whole question of how do you set up a true democracy. Jefferson, I think, wanted to go headlong into giving the common man, although we have to factor in the slavery question there too, but they had to give the common man full reign of his rights and of his position in society, and egalitarian society. Of course, 100% correct in that, although the times were new. Adams was a little bit more, well, we've got to make sure that the people in charge are qualified, and so he was, I would say, you might think that he was perhaps a little bit more elitist about it. I think the elitism was an educational elite, an intellectual elite, people who are prepared for the kinds of duties that the government requires. And it wasn't an aristocratic elite, it wasn't a lineage elite, he was not an elitist in that sense at all, but I think he wanted to make sure that the reins of government were in trained hands, whereas Jefferson might be seen as being a little bit more, let her go. Well, I don't know why that is, but I do want to say that he wasn't quite so upset with posterity in the sense that he wanted to make sure that there were monuments to him. His obsession with posterity was that he knew he would be dismissed, he would be forgotten, he would be put aside in the whole thing of history. But now, one of the things is he was number 2 president, and so the second president is not the same as the first. So it's like Avis and Hertz. They might have tried harder, but he's still number 2. So people's perception, just sort of the marketing perception of being number 2, is so-called lesser. And also, he wasn't a particularly astute politician in the sense of being able to woo the public, woo the press. He was much too blunt. He was much too direct. He was a real Yankee from that point of view. He didn't have the trappings of diplomacy and finesse that people like Thomas Jefferson, which people in the public eye look at. He also had to labor against being related to Sam Adams. He was a great friend and supporter of Sam Adams, but wherever he went in the beginning of the revolution, he was like, oh, Adams, Sam Adams? No, sorry, John. Even when he went to France the first time, and everybody was making this big to-do about le fameux Adams. Well, it wasn't actually le fameux Adams. He had to apologize all the time that he wasn't Sam Adams, that he was, sorry, I'm John Adams. Still today, people will confuse him with Sam Adams, and because my name is Sam Goodyear, everybody's always saying, oh yes, you play Sam Adams. No, it's Sam Goodyear, John Adams. Oh, John Quincy Adams, yes. I said, no, John Quincy Adams was John Adams' son. there has been a lot of difficulty, and John Adams has not been on a piece of currency until just this past May when he was put onto the dollar. But that's in a whole series of presidential numbers, so it's not a really special position like Lincoln or Hamilton, who probably didn't deserve it, and something John Adams would say. So he has been relegated to a second place in the perception of historians and the public, wrongly, and that's one of the reasons I like portraying him. This is a very important patriot among many important patriots, and he's finally, maybe going to make such an amazing comeback with this David McCullough biography, and the new series is just about to open with Paul Giamatti as John Adams in the Tom Hanks series on HBO. So there's hope for Adams yet. It's not too late. I think all presidents should, actually. But certainly, let's start with Adams, who doesn't have one, and he was the first vice president, absolutely in the crucible of that particular role in our country. Second president. He wrote the oldest constitution in history. The Massachusetts Constitution is actually the oldest surviving constitution of all. He was the first American diplomat. He was the first American to go to the English court after we won our independence from Britain. A hugely important person. Hugely important person. So he deserves a monument in Washington, and it will not surprise me when it happens soon. Well, I think anybody's lucky when he finds the right mate. The divorce rate shows that people make mistakes, and that's perfectly legitimate. We can actually have a second chance. And then there are some people who stay in a marriage that probably is destroying them both. And so it's not exactly the luck of the draw, but it's not a foregone conclusion that you're going to find the right person. Somehow, John Adams and Abigail Adams met one another and saw that they were such a perfect fit. I think the perfection comes not only in their relationship with each other, but especially in the relationship when they were apart. He had to be in Europe a good deal of the time, away from her, 3 years at a stretch. That's going to try any marriage. And in those days, it wasn't like you could just call up or even send a letter and get it there in a week. And now, in those days, it was 2 months before you could have an exchange of information and feelings by letter. And so the strain on a relationship like that is unbelievable. And so they were remarkable in the fact that they were able to withstand this kind of tests and these ordeals. And I think perhaps one of the reasons that it worked was that they both believed in the cause of the American nation. And so they were willing to go that extra mile and to not so much make sacrifices, but do what they had to because they were able to, and they were going not to shirk their responsibilities and not avoid using their considerable gifts for the good of the people.